Welcome to Chapter 3. We're going to be talking about customers. We're going to be creating invoices, receiving payments, entering sales receipts, and making deposits. To start off with, let's just talk a little bit about the Customer Center. The Customer Center you can get to from your home screen, or you can get to from the customer menu up on top. Just go to the Customer Center. When this comes up, you'll see a listing here of all my different customers. If I want to go in and add a new customer, I can just go up here, click New Customer, put in their information. I'm just making this up as I go along. You can put in their information, their email, etc. Under payment settings, this is where you can put in their account number. You can put in a credit limit. The credit limit is a nice feature because with the credit limit, what you can do is you can, for example, put in $1,000. If that $1,000 is exceeded, if you go over that limit, QuickBooks will send you a message asking you if you want to override that. It's a good way to control customers who maybe do not pay on a steady basis or are maybe behind in payment. So you can choose their payment terms, their default, their delivery method. Email really is where it's at these days because you can always ask them to confirm receipt of the invoice, which is a nice feature. If this was the real world, of course, there's a credit card information as well. There's also some stuff in here about sales tax settings that you can put in. Just ignore that. Under additional information, this is where you can actually go in and define fields, for example, or put in something like their birthday or something like that. Under job information, we're not going to use this at this time in the course, but that's basically how you go ahead and enter in a new customer. The next part in your textbook talks about deleting a customer. Again, typically in the real world, you probably wouldn't delete the customer. What you could do is just go in to their information, click on the edit here, and then you can go ahead and make them inactive. That's probably a better choice. But you can see here that this customer has a balance, so I probably don't want to make it inactive. I'm going to hit no. But if you do want to delete, for example, and follow what the book says, you can highlight the customer and then go up here, go to edit, and then go to delete customer, and that will then delete the customer. All right, so the next section, let's get in and let's talk about actually entering in some invoices. So I'm going to go back to the home page. And as we go through this process, from the very beginning, it's important to have an understanding of how the flow works of your data, of your information, all the way from creating the invoice to receiving payment to recording the deposit. That's with creating an invoice using accounts receivable. However, your book will go into creating a sales receipt, and notice with the sales receipt, that's bypassing that invoice system, as with the sales receipt, that's an instant immediate payment. So it's simply sales receipt and then deposit. So it's really important in this chapter to understand when you're going to invoice and when you're going to use a sales receipt. So to start with create invoice, you're going to click on the icon, and then you're going to choose, for example, let's pick somebody here. Let's pick Jenny, and I'm going to go to a new invoice here. Let's go to a new one. There we go. So what I want to do is let's pick Jenny here, and we're of course going to make sure that our date's correct. Follow the dates in your book. You can choose the terms. You can put in the purchase order number if that's needed. But here you can choose, for example, let's say that she had some decorating services. She had 2 hours. Those are at $50. That's the rate per hour. Down here I can put in a note, thank you for your business. But basically it's very straightforward as far as doing the invoice. But then of course behind the scenes, QuickBooks is entering in the journal entry for an invoice. And just a little review here. The journal entry for an invoice, I'm going to refresh my journal here. That invoice that I just did, it's right down here at the very bottom because it's the most current transaction that I've done. What you're going to see here, what's happening is that I'm debiting accounts receivable, and then I'm crediting the decorating services, which is account 4020, which is a revenue account. So just keep in mind that, when you enter these forms, QuickBooks is entering in the journal entries for you behind the scenes. All right, so the next step here is we're going to go to receive payments. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the home page again. And again, I created an invoice, very straightforward, honestly, very simple to do. Just make sure you have your dates correct. But the next part is you're going to actually receive payment from your customer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to receive payment from the same customer. I'm going to choose that Jenny again. Okay. And here's the invoice that I had billed her. And up here at the top, when I put in the amount, I'm going to put in 100. That was the amount of the invoice. Keep note, though, that, for example, if there was some type of arrangement with your customer that she was maybe going to pay half, this month and then half next month, you can do partial payments. So if she had sent in a partial payment, you would then apply that partial payment. And notice that when I update the amount here, it updates it here as well. Again, make sure your date is correct. In this case, we're saying that she's paying by check, and then you put in the check number, whatever that may be. But notice with the underpayment that QuickBooks gives you the option to leave it as an underpayment or to write it off. So for example, if this customer had paid, $50 and let's say, no, excuse me, $100 and 2 cents, you can see here that this 2 cents, we're probably just going to do what? Write it off, or we can leave the credit for them later. But again, that's basically how that works. So I'm going to put in just the $100. Here we go. All right. And then I'm going to go to Save and Close. Okay. So after you do the invoice, you receive the payment, the next part is to record the deposit. And to record the deposit, that's actually when some companies, have a courier service come and pick up the deposits, or maybe it's something that you do daily or weekly, whatever the case. When you actually do go to the bank is when you have to record the deposit. So let's try that again. When you do record deposits, there we go. You should see those payments that were applied to the invoice. You should see those pop up. As you can see, the first time I did it, it didn't pop up, so I closed this window, and then I went back into record deposits, and then the window did pop up. So I'm just going to just do just the Jenny Guthrie here. Click OK. So here's the deposit. Notice that we're going to update the date here, make sure it's going into the right cash account. And keep in mind that when the customer payment first comes in, it goes to undeposited funds. And I'm going to show you the journal here in a second just to show you how that works. So I'm going to do Save and Close. There we go. So let's bring up our journal here, and then let's see how these transactions were affected. So here's my invoice that I originally did with Jenny for the $100 with accounts receivable and then decorating services. Now, notice when I get my payment, this is what you learned in accounting class, what's going to happen to accounts receivable? It's going to be credited, right? But instead of debiting cash, we're debiting what's called undeposited funds. And the reason for that is because we have not yet made our deposit. So it's undeposited. Once we do our deposit, notice down here, we've done our deposit, then what's going to happen is we're going to then finally debit cash and then credit that undeposited funds. All right, so I'm on page 3-23, and we're now on the Enter Sales Receipts window area. For this section, I'm going to go back again to the home page. And again, remember when we do the sales receipt, that's for you're billing your customer and receiving the payment at the same time. It's an instant payment, okay? So we're bypassing using accounts receivable. So it's just the sales receipt and then record the deposit. So in our example, in the textbook, we're going to go here to create sales receipt, and we're going to pick whichever customer it is. Let me pick on this this Beverly here, okay? And let's just, go along with this, that she's getting some design services, maybe 3 hours, all right? All right, just ignore that. So 3 hours, you could put in a message, again, make sure that your date is correct, and then do Save and Close. And then notice that, again, it's just the last step is just record deposits. And there it is. There's Beverly Jones. There she shows up. Click on OK. All right, make sure your date's right. You have the correct cash account. Click on Save and Close. And then I'm going to go back in here to my journal and go back down to the bottom. So now here's my sales receipt for that Beverly Jones. Notice that the journal entry, if we were in a accounting class, if we weren't using QuickBooks, if we were doing this by hand, you can see here that it's undeposited funds. Again, it's not cash just because we haven't yet deposited the money at the bank, like physically deposited the money. So in this case, it's just undeposited funds, and then we're going to credit the revenue. But then notice when we actually make the deposit that it's cash is the debit, and then we're crediting undeposited funds, which now has a zero balance. All right, the last part here is just talking about some of the different reports that we have in QuickBooks as far as customer reports. So if I go up here and I go to customers, and if I go to in here the open invoices report, here is where I can see invoices that have yet to be paid. You can see that I've got the Burger Company here, and I've got Franco Films. Both of those have open invoices that need to yet be paid. The second report that I'm going to show is up here under reports, again under customers, and I'm going to go to the customer balance detail. And this report obviously shows what's been invoiced, what's been paid for each individual customer. And then the last report I'm going to show is the customer contact list, and this is where you have a listing of your customer with their address, their contact information. If you do need to make a change, again, use that quick zoom, and then you can go right in and you can edit their phone number if needed. All right, so the very last thing I want to talk about is on page 3-35, and I just brought up a little snapshot here of the textbook. This is page 3-35 at the top, and this is for the Lynn's Music Studio. And I just starred the items just to give you a heads up that are sales receipts. They're not invoices. Notice that it says received payment immediately. What throws students off is that these still have an invoice number, but these are not invoices. These are sales receipts because they received the payment immediately. Whereas, for example, here on the 26th, notice it says net 10 days. That is an invoice. All right, so just be aware, or maybe go through and star the ones that say received payment immediately, because those are the sales receipts. In Chapter 3, that's the part that students typically get caught up on a little bit, but hopefully my video will help you avoid that. Thank you.